they don't just say the dog is barking and looks vicious. They're saying it slams itself against the window, bites the window, leaves saliva on the window. And doesn't that, at a minimum, get you to a question of fact of constructive notice, even if the homeowners were not home for any of this? Grant that to you again. I think the standard may work against you on that, but let's go with that for one moment. You walk in, you've got dog saliva all over the window on numerous occasions?
There was no testimony from our clients of this type of activity, and there was no basis for them to conclude that.
There may not have been that testimony from your clients, but it was offered through the affidavits that conduct occurred. And again, as to my colleagues asking, a question of fact in the very least being arisen, whether or not they reported it to the postal authorities.
This may be not perfect compliance with regulations, but how does that affect the truth of the matter asserted, which is simply that they've observed this dog on multiple occasions, hundreds of occasions, if you believe the affidavits, exhibit vicious behaviors. And that may be imputable to the property owner.
Your Honor, I can't cross-examine an affidavit.
Now that we're talking about negligence, if it's a domestic animal and it didn't wander from a farm, the Hastings exception.
I have a cat, and I'm not saying if I have a cat or not, but if I had a cat and it got out and it ran across the street and a car swerves and gets in an accident, am I liable?
I think that there are cases which say that violation of a leash law, which I guess would depend on your particular locality and whether it includes cats and whether cats are required to be leashed. I don't think
there's no rules. Where, as far as I know, there's no rules. I have a door, the cat goes out, cat goes where it wants, right? So now my cat runs, if I had one in front of a car, what happens?
Well, I think we'd have to have some more information about, because it all stems from having notice. There is a notice element to negligence.
But I know the cat goes out, I know it leaves the yard. What else do I need to know?
I need to know, has this cat done that before? Has this cat done that before? Is there a municipal ordinance that would require the cat to be contained?
So let's say there isn't. There's no ordinance that requires the restraint of cat.
I would say no, then, Your Honor.
If those statements are taken as true, that there's a very, very high likelihood that the owners would have witnessed that behavior at some other point in time and therefore be willing to decide there was constructive notice.
Your Honor, now I could see constructive notice had somehow or other those folks who apparently were so worried that they didn't bother to tell their co-employees.
Well, let me change the facts. And suppose the postal workers had, as was required by postal regulations, reported to the supervisors, hey, this dog is throwing itself against the window every time we come. That would have created a question of fact, despite the affidavits of the owners saying we never saw this?
I'm not convinced that it gets there either, Judge.
Well, so then the fact that they signed doesn't really matter, that they didn't report it.
What it shows is a lack of concern on their part for what they observed.
How's that? How is that?
Well, if you were really concerned about that, and you knew that you weren't the only postal employee or mail carrier on this route, you would tell your colleagues.